Alright, boys and girls, here is part 2 of chapter 17 of The Frog Princess. Who in the name of all that's edible are you? Asked the otter. I am the swamp fairy, I announced, in what I hoped was a confident and convincing voice. You are, huh? You look like a frog, and to me that means supper. I do believe in big meals. There's always room for more. Don't be impertinent, I said, holding my head high. It's never a good idea to insult a fairy. I'm here because you have something that belongs to me. Really? Said the otter. And what's that? My bracelet. You took it from the pond, and I want it back. The otter laughed, a high-twitching chirp that ordinarily would have made me smile. Sorry, you're not getting anything from me that way. Give me a reason I should think you're a swamp fairy and not the second course of supper. You asked for it, I said, flinging a handful of the sparkling mica dust into the air for an impressive effect. The otter drew back and winced, using his paw to wipe the dust from his eyes. I coughed and wiped my own eyes as well, for I'd neglected to take the breeze into account and half the dust had blown in my direction. My eyes were watering and I pointed my magic wand at the otter. Thankful that I didn't have to read just then, I recited one of the spells I had read in Vanaby's cottage. Begone ye old and dingy hue, erase the old, bring in the new. Bright and shiny, lustrous locks, make it look real, not from a box. The spell, hair so new, hadn't been intended for otters, so I decided to customize it. Redo yon fur to shades of blue, and make the color even ever true. With the sound of tiny cymbals and a flash of blue lights, the otter's fur turned a nice shade of turquoise. Ag! Screamed the otter. What have you done to me? I thought you needed a little convincing. Now do you believe that I'm a swamp fairy? The otter snorted. I don't know if you're a swamp fairy or just some overdressed frog, but either way, I'm not giving that bracelet to you. What would you do with it anyway? The thing is almost as big as you are. You can forget it. What if I make all of your fur fall out? I bluffed. What would you do in the winter? The otter glanced down at his thick pelt and shivered. When he looked up, he seemed resigned, although not too happy. You drive a hard bargain. Wait here. I'll get the bracelet. The light from the darn thing was keeping me awake at night anyway. I was so excited I hugged myself with glee as the otter trudged down the entrance to his den. The sound of thumping and scrabbling came from the tunnel, and then he reappeared, his blunt muzzle speckled with dirt. Frowning his displeasure, he shoved the bracelet into my hands. It was bigger than my head and would fit easily around my neck, but I was afraid it would choke me if I suddenly turned back into a human. Although I knew it wasn't supposed to take a kiss to turn me back, just holding the bracelet made me nervous. After all, it had already done something unexpected once. I stared at it, trying to decide what to do. Well, said the otter, do you want something else? No, that was it, I said, backing away. You may go about your business again, otter. Huh? Said the otter, scratching his head. Fairy or not, you sure are a strange one. Clutching the bracelet, I hopped back along the riverbank to the tall grass where I last spoke with Edric, but he was nowhere in sight. I started to call his name until I realized how dangerous that would be. If the dog was somewhere around, the last thing we wanted to do was attract attention. We were still frogs after all, and still needed to be careful. I waited in the tall grass for the longest time, getting more and more worried, until I heard the slap of something wet landing on the mud behind me, nearly making me jump out of my skin. So you got it. I knew you would. I whipped my head around and my knees went weak with relief. Edric, you got away from the dog? How did you do it? Edric smiled smugly and tapped himself on the chest. I'm a better swimmer, that's how. No dog can keep up with me. I grinned and threw my arms around his neck in a big, froggy hug. I was so worried. Why? He asked, frowning. I told you I'd meet you here. Now put on that bracelet before we lose it again. Is something wrong? Said a voice, and I looked up to see Gracina striding through the grass. I shook my head and grinned up at her. Not a thing. In fact, everything is perfect. Look, I got the bracelet. I held it up to show her. It was so big it took both my hands to lift it. Gracina smiled at me absent-mindedly as if she were thinking about something else. I know, I saw you. You did very well. I'd like to get a little further from the otter before I put it on, though, just in case he changes his mind. Good idea, said Gracina, although I don't think he will. Excuse me, I'll be back in a few minutes. There's something about that otter. She walked away in a daze, not noticing the prickers that caught at her skirts as she passed. I would have followed her or tried to make her come with us, but Edric grabbed my arm and tugged. Come on, he said. Let's get this over with. Fine, but as soon as we're back to normal, we have to find my aunt. She looks so odd. Stop right there, said an authoritative voice. A glimmering light descended from the sky and settled on the ground. The light swirled and shifted into the form of a fairy, her blue hair streaked with gray, her violet-colored eyes looking tired and slightly bored. Enormous iridescent wings of violet and mauve fanned the air behind her. When she took a step toward us, her long blue-flowered petaled skirt, browned with curling at the edges, rustled around her ankles. Bending down, she stretched out her hand and said, "That bracelet belongs to me now." I gasped, "Who are you?" The fairy glared at me. "I'm the swamp fairy, the real one, and only honest-to-goodness swamp fairy. I was told that someone was impersonating me. What is the world coming to? A fairy goes away on vacation for a couple of decades, and suddenly everyone tries to take advantage. Shame on you. I have to fine you for that. Hand over your bracelet." I took a step back. "What do you want with my bracelet?" The fairy looked me over as if I might be hiding something. "It seems to be the only thing you have of value, so that's how you'll pay for your fine." "No, wait. I can't give you this bracelet," I said, clutching it to my chest. "We really need it. Isn't there anything else I can give you?" "Nope, that's it. I don't need any firstborn tadpoles, if that's what you're thinking. So give me the bracelet and be on your way." I couldn't do it, not when we were so close. Panicking, I turned to Edric, and my eyes fell on the vial of dragon's breath. "I know, Edric. Turn around." I hurriedly untied the twine, holding the vial on Edric's back. "I thought you said there wasn't any swamp fairy," Edric whispered. "I didn't think there was," I whispered back. "But how do we know she's—" "Edric, don't say another word. You're going to get us in even more trouble." "I can hear you," trilled the swamp fairy. "Hasn't anyone ever told you that it's not polite to whisper? Now I have to raise your fine." "Sorry," I said. "Here, would this do instead of the bracelet?" I had the vial in the sunlight so the fairy could see the beautiful swirling colors. "What is it?" asked the swamp fairy, looking skeptical. "It's a vial of dragon's breath. I understand it's very valuable." "Dragon's breath? I haven't seen any of that in ages. Here, let me have it." I started to pass the vial to the swamp fairy, but I was fumble-fingered, and it slipped out of my hand. My heart jumped into my throat when the vial landed with a thud on her foot. "Ow, ow, ow," she said, hopping on one foot while cradling the other in her hand. "You dropped it on me. Ow, ow, ow." Edric and I backed behind a clump of grass, trying to stay under the hopping fairy. "I'm sorry," I said, feeling like an idiot. "I didn't mean to." "Never mind that," said Edric. "Is the vial all right?" The swamp fairy gave him a nasty look. Ignoring Edric, I hurtled over the grass and bent down to pick up the vial. When I offered it to the fairy, she snatched it from my hand and gave me a nasty look as well. The fairy uncorked the vial and sniffed it cautiously, her face promptly turning a bright green. Coughing, she rammed the cork back into the opening. "Hoo-wee, does that stuff ever stink? That's dragon's breath, all right. Sure, I'll take this as your fine. I have a good friend who's a dragon. He's getting old and fat, and he has been short of breath for years. This would make a great birthday present for him. But now, you have another fine to pay. 2, come to think of it. 1 fine for whispering about me, and the other for hurting my foot. What else have you got that you can give me?" "Why, nothing other than the bracelet." "Then I'd rather take that as well. It is awfully pretty." Grabbing the bracelet, the fairy turned it over and shook it, smiling when the light danced on the little symbols. "But we need it," Edric wailed. "Without that bracelet, we'll be stuck as frogs forever." "Really?" said the fairy. "What does this bracelet have to do with you being a frog?" I didn't want to tell her, but Edric had already said too much. I couldn't see any harm in telling her the rest. I was a human until I kissed Edric, but I was wearing the bracelet. The fairy's eyes opened wide. "And the bracelet turned you into a frog?" I nodded. "Yes, it's a—" "Here, take it," she said, thrusting the bracelet at me. "The last thing I want to do is turn into a frog. Imagine me, a hairless, slimy—" "Hey," said Edric, scowling at the fairy. Afraid of what he might say, I jabbed him in the stomach with my elbow. "But that's all we have," I said. The fairy took a step back. "Never mind. The dragon's breath will do just fine. Promise never to impersonate me again. I'll forget your other offenses, and we'll call it even." "Oh, I promise," I said. Edric and I hopped away from the river as if a dragon were after us. Faster than you can say 4 fat frog feet 5 times fast, we jumped through a small copse of saplings and into a nearby meadow. "Now, can you put it on?" Edric asked as soon as he caught his breath. "I hate to be pushy, but something else is bound to happen if you don't." "Just a minute," I said, setting the bracelet on the ground. Since the bracelet seemed to remain the same size no matter what, I wasn't going to take any chances. I sat down, placed my wrist inside the bracelet, and patted the ground. "Edric, have a seat over here." Edric hurried to sit beside me. "I'm ready," he said, puckering his lips. "Let's hope this works." I crossed my fingers and leaned over to kiss him. I saw movement out of the corner of my eye and looked up to see a dirty white dog trotting into the meadow, its nose held high as it snuffled the air. A sparrow shot from the ground by the dog's feet, but the beast swung its head from side to side as if homing in on a scent, oblivious to everything else. I tried to ignore the dog as I kissed Edric long and hard on the lips. When nothing happened right away, Edric's face drooped in a disappointment, and I felt as though I was about to cry. A breeze blew from behind us, carrying our scent directly towards the dog. With his ears pricked forward, he swung his head in our direction and trotted toward us, his tail wagging like a flag. Resigned to certain doom, I was watching the dog when my fingers and toes began to tingle. The feeling spread up my arms and down my legs. A shiver ran along my spine, chased by the golden fuzzy feeling. Once again my head felt light and full of bubbles. Once again a tremendous wind rushed past me, and I fell to the ground with a gray cloud filling my head, but not before I saw the dog collapse as well.